Hello, dear students. This is Dr. Purnima, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Vasant Kanya Mahavidyalaya, admitted to the privileges of Banaras Hindu University. And here we are on Module 1, Week 1, and we are discussing the course Postmodern Art and Literature, Theory and Practice. And in Lecture 4, we are going to discuss aspects of postmodernism, high and low culture. We have already discussed in previous lectures that there is a mixing of high and low culture in postmodernism. So that high and low culture, how it gets mixed up and how it creates plurality and multiplicity is what we will discuss in this lecture. So when we have discussed in earlier lectures, this is a brief recap that we had discussed the thinkers and the theories, and we had discussed the origins and context and the decline of grand narratives. And we had also discussed that how little narratives are formed. And this is what Lyotard talks about in his work. And then we also talked about that there are certain differences between modernism and postmodernism. And we also discussed the various thinkers like Foucault. Foucault gave the theory knowledge is power. Then Derrida, who gave deconstruction. And Baudrillard, who was talking about simulacra and simulacra. And that also, there is one important principle that comes up in postmodern theories, and that is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. It is similar to Einstein's theory of relativity. We cannot know the position of a particle for sure. And this concept of quantum physics can be applied to day-to-day life also. So in day-to-day life also, we cannot know for sure what is true and what is not true. And that's why the impact of this theorist created a kind of culture which was very confused about its identity. And that's why we have to read, and for further reading, I would tell you to read Jean-François Lyotard's The Postmodern Condition. So when we were defining postmodernity, these are the various definitions of postmodernity that came to our mind. Postmodernity is exhibited through an irrationalist trend from romanticism to existentialism. This is what Habermas describes postmodernity to be. So what is romanticism? You know, romantic age was somewhere around the 18th, 19th century. And existentialism is a modern thing that happens in around 1930s. So from romantic world where you can believe in high ideals of liberty, fraternity, equality, you come to existentialism, or what I would call existential crisis, where you start questioning what is the meaning of existence? Why do we actually live? And what is the meaning of life? So this meaninglessness of life leads to absurdity. And in literature, you will also see that this is represented in absurd theatre. So rise of existentialism also led to absurdity in modern novels and theatre. Then postmodern culture emerges out of modernism. We have talked about residual modernism earlier. So it is emerging out of modernism. So it is not just a break or an end of modernism, but it is a continuum or continuity of modernism and pragmatism. And it changes in modern science, leading to William James's vision of an unfinished pluralist universe. So every time it is transforming itself, mixing with other cultures, and a new form of culture is being formed. And that is the plurality of culture or mixing of high and low culture that we are talking about in today's lecture. Then we also talked about post-structuralism and all post-industrialism, post-Marxism. That all things are also there in the definition of postmodernity. So it is an emergence of post-structuralist order that we considered in Derrida's deconstruction. So it is no longer such sure signifier and signified, and there is a symbolic meaning of everything. But we are leading towards an aporia, a loss of meaning. And so we cannot have a fixed meaning of a word. Meaning is derivatory, it changes over period of time, and one word can have multiple meanings also. That is also reflected in meaning of I. Richards. So, and it also leads to neo-Marxism. So Marxism also redefined itself in Frankfurt School. And we have the pragmatic theories from the tradition of Kant, Hegel, Marx, and Nietzsche. And all these writers are questioning, they're talking about idealism, and when we reach Nietzsche, we start questioning the center. and we get the terminologies like, is God dead? So we start questioning that, is there any center, or the universe moves from theocentric world to a more individual, human, anthropocentric world. So it is a mixing of residual and emergent forms of cultural production, in the words of Raymond Williams. So that is the residual and emergent forms, or high and low forms, of postmodernism that we will discuss in the further lecture. Postmodernism is also very nicely known as the age of madness. When we were talking about it, is very simplified way of saying that it is an age of paranoia and schizophrenia. So basically, what is paranoia and schizophrenia? We live in a world where we question everything, and that also dismantles the psychology. So people, when we were talking about id ego, superego, and we were talking about subconscious, at least we believe that there is some kind of sanity in the society and in man. But in postmodern condition, people couldn't actually keep their mental state healthy, because the anxiety and the anxiousness and the existentialism of modern world many-foldedly represented in the postmodern world. And it led to a culture of narcissism. So what is basically narcissism? Narcissus was in self-love. So that self-love, looking at your own image and thinking always about your own self, that egocentric world that is created, that is the culture of narcissism. And which in Thomas Mann's world of Dr. Faustus is about a man who represents the Faustian legend of Goethe or Dr. Faustus. And this man, he is mad about achieving more and more and more. And in later part of his life, he turns neurotic and he turns schizophrenic. Why? Because he wanted to achieve the high mastery of art. And that high mastery of art can never be achieved. So that is why this age became very confused and confounded and anxious, and it was proportionately very high compared to the preceding modern age. So when we talk about postmodern art, we also talk about pop culture. And what was pop culture actually doing? Because when we will further discuss, we'll discuss pop art, but pop art also was derived from popular culture. So what is popular culture doing? It is attracting mass audience. And this is also leading to the mixing of we were talking about the mixing of high and low culture. So popular cultures or pop culture is also doing the same thing. So it wants to have a lot of people there attending it. So they want a mass audience. They want a transient. See, everything is transient. Everything is passing. So earlier when writers like Shakespeare, when they were writing their work, they wanted it to stand the test of time. So they were writing it for a long period of time. But everything that is written in postmodern world becomes famous and is soon forgotten. This is and it is expendable. It can be done away with. So earlier, any writer was thinking about progeny, what people of future generations will read my work. But in mass culture and in popular culture, people write their work, they become instantly famous, and then they can be easily forgotten. So any work of art that is being produced now is not done with the dedication and the amount of hard work that was required for a very progenitic work, or which has to remain for a long period. It is mass produced. It can be produced very easily. It can be produced very easily, but it will not remain for a very long period of time. And then it is attracting big business. They don't want to do it just for art's sake. Now art is a commodity. So art is for sales. How much price tag you can attach to an art. So art has become a big business, and a work of art is actually judged in terms of how much it will be the sales price of the work of art. Then pop culture was also what it was doing. It was using irony, satire, and it was making it very witty. So people would laugh at it. And you will also see that in pop culture, there's a lot of rise of stand-up comedies. Why? Because they have this witty dialogue and people want to laugh. Then there is a lot of body fetish, because they want to attract large number. So they use this body fetishism. So they would attract people by showing the body. And then it is gimmicky because it has nothing substantial to order or offer. So what it is doing, it is just copying and creating gimmicks. and then it is glamorous so that it can attract more and more audience. And basically, who is their target audience? The target audience is the youth, because they are large in number, they are very impressionable, so they always aim the popular culture towards the youth. So when we were talking about high and low culture, and popular culture was very important for mixing high and low culture, and that led to various kinds of innovations in art, and that one of those innovations was bricolage. So bricolage in art, when we look at it, it is a term that came from the French word bricoler, and it is meaning to link something or to do odd jobs, or refers to the practice of constructing something new by piecing together materials, ideas, or styles. So a variety of sources, ideas, and styles are mixed together to create a piece of art. So now there is not a single form of art, but various forms of art merged together, and especially these forms are very mismatched and unrelated, but they are put together in the form of bricolage art. And they can use very creative ways. They can use cut and paste creativity, they can remix, they can collage, they can sample, and in this way bricolage art is created. How it is done in literature? So Claude Lévi-Strauss saw this form in art, and he compared it to literature, and he says that a structural anthropologist way is no longer there, so everything is breaking and they are mixing in a new form. So he introduced the term in the books The Savage Mind in 1962, and he described myth making as a form of bricolage. So he says that new myths are being made, and this is again how you're mixing myths with older myths with new stories. That is also and it is unrelated things are mixed with symbols, motifs, ideas, tropes, and traditions, and then a new form of myth is being born. So the postmodern thinkers and cultural theorists like Roland Barthes and Jean Baudrillard, they also described the term bricolage, and they used it also to create newer forms of understanding of postmodernism. Then very interesting aspect of postmodernism is kitsch and camp. You know what happens in postmodernism? Often the high and the low, they are so similar that we get confused between them. So the similar is with kitsch and camp. So what is kitsch doing? Overly sentimental, it is very emotional, but this over sentimentality, it is very manipulative. Like they will use crying babies, or they will use some paintings, and they will attract audience by sentimentalizing their emotions. But it will be simplistic, it will be cliche, there will be nothing innovative about it, and it will be a very easy form of art. And it is often mass produced because nobody wants to do the hard work. They want easy success, and it is made for commercial purposes, like advertisements. They would hit your sentiments so that you are forced to buy a product. And then it appeals to popular or low-brow taste. So naturally, anyone who is not very sophisticated will generate an interest in something that is overtly emotional or sentimental. And this is something that T.S. Eliot was afraid of. So T.S. Eliot, that's why he makes his wasteland deliberately very difficult, because he thinks that everyone will start consuming his work. So he wanted it to save it for the people who actually had substance. So that's why he gave a lot of allusions, a lot of references to make it difficult to understand. And camp appears very similar to kitsch, but it is an exaggeration, and it is extra, it is also over the top, it is flamboyant, it is show off, and it is like drag queens or Hollywood glam. But it is not like kitsch. Unlike kitsch, it is not without purpose. Camp, drag, and camp has a purpose, and their purpose is to subvert the patriarchal or the dominant ideology, and they create their own discourse, and for that they use irony. And it's not just bad, it's knowingly bad, and that makes it subversive and fabulous. So kitsch is popular, it's lowbrow, but because it doesn't have taste. But camp makes it very queer, and it makes it very flamboyant and lowbrow, but it has a mission, and it is just attacking what is mainstream. And it also has gentle playfulness about it, and it doesn't take life and itself very seriously. And it is often associated, the term drag and camp is used with queer culture. So actually, when we were talking about the marginalized communities, and we talked about gender issues, and we talked about feminism, but queer culture, which includes LGBTQ right movements, that also became a part of the postmodern movement. And especially in fashion, film, and performance, this queer culture took the form of camp. Then, when we talk about the styles of art, there is expressionism, abstract art. So now, when we considered bricolage and we considered Christian camp, similar are the terms parody and pastiche. And I have tried to explain parody and pastiche through the foot and boot fetishism. So, what happened when we are copying something? Why are we copying something? That also comes under parody and pastiche. So, parody is something that you are making fun of. Like in the last class, when we were talking about it, we discussed Shamila. And in that way, parody has a humorous tone, but it is a satire also. What is pastiche doing? Pastiche is not doing it for humorous or comic purposes, it is doing for giving it a meaning. So, and something that has happened in art often gets copied. Sometimes it is knowingly done, and sometimes it is unknowingly done. So I would give you the example of Van Gogh's The Boot. This is under Creative Commons license, so it is there displayed. So you can see the Van Gogh's boot, and when it was seen by the critics, when critics analyze a work of art, they look at it from various angles. So Van Gogh's boots are about a man who has worked hard. So it is about a peasant who has worked in the farms. So the boots are torn. So there is a background story to Van Gogh's boot. Now, what happens in the postmodern world? People are actually very much influenced by the art which already exists. So they try to copy that art. And Andy Warhol also makes a similar kind of creation with the diamond dust shoes. Then how it is similar to Van Gogh or how it is different from Van Gogh? Similarity between both are that they are both about foot and boot. But what is the difference? The difference is that diamond dust shoes are only a brand shoes that are displayed for the buyers. And it makes the shoes look beautiful, but it doesn't have any background story. It is only for the buyers to buy it or sellers to sell it. So it takes away the background story of Van Gogh's art. And then how Andy Warhol explains his diamond dust shoes. Very innovative, and also I feel grounded by creating shoes, and I will only create shoes. His shoes that doesn't have the emotive feeling of Van Gogh's boot. This is the problem that is created by postmodern fetishism. And then naturally, what happens in postmodernism? People want to create something that is very unique, that has not been captured before, and that also has a dreamlike narrative. So there are another set of foot and boot that is by René Magritte. René Magritte's Le Modèle Rogue is about a boot which is being converted into a feet, or a feet being converted into the boots. So this mixing of two very different images together is also something that is very, very evident in postmodern art and literature. So we can see through Van Gogh's The Boot and Andy Warhol's The Diamond Dust Shoes and René Magritte's Le Modèle Rogue, that is again a pair of boots which are converting into feet. We can see that there is so much that the art has to offer, and how interpretations of art change over time, and how interpretation of art changes over time. It also influences the kind of work that is being produced, because it is a time of mass production. And Andy Warhol also got a lot of awards for her work, the diamond dust shoes. So we see that no longer it is the peasant's boot or it is the poor man's boot, but it is a culture which is pretending to be something else. So they are just recreating the image of the boot without realizing that what they are showcasing doesn't have any background story. So that lack of background story is very evident in the postmodern works. And they don't even understand that what they are trying to produce lack any meaning, because they don't have any substance or background, and they are only produced for mass production or for consumption, and they no longer have the emotive feelings that was there earlier. So in today's lecture, we understood that how high and low culture mix through similar sounding terms, when we often get confused between what is kitsch and what is camp, because we see so many similarities that we often confuse camp with kish, because we think that camp, okay, this is something that they are also doing some kind of vulgar comedy, or they are showing so much flamboyance, but they have a cause. When the LGBTQ are doing this, when the lesbian, bisexual, gay, transgender, and queer community, when they are doing this, they have a cause. They want to show that they are different, but they are also part of the mainstream culture and they cannot be ignored any longer. So that is a rights movement, and that is not without a cause. But when it happens in kids, it's what they're actually doing. They're actually doing it without any purpose and meaning. So this is the problem of postmodernity. Some people, just to become famous or just to become popular, they forget that art should have a cause and art, but they are not talking about art for life's sake. They're not even talking about art for art's sake, but they are talking about art as a commodity, art that can be marketed, art that can be packaged, art that can be commodified, art that can be sold. And this whole conceptual difference that is there in the two streams of the high and low culture of postmodernism, that is something that we have to understand, so that we don't fall in the trap of commodification and consumer culture. Also, when we see the parody and pastiche, there also parody is for mocking something. It is ironical, satirical. Pastiche is just an influence. When you're influenced by a work of art, naturally its impact will be there. So in Rene Margaret, it is not a parody. It is not parodying anything. It is not just doing it for an ironical sake, or not just copying for copying sake. But when it is done in a surrealist way, they are also giving a multiple meaning to boots, because the dreamlike narrative tells that every shoes that is being worn has a feet inside. So shoes cover the feet, and feet take the part in shoes. So how they are interrelated, that two, and that is also a concept that can be seen in bricolage. Two very different things are merging together, and bricolage can be in terms of style, it can be in terms of images, it can be used in the terms of juxtaposition of images. So these three kinds of boots that are there in Van Gogh, Andy Warhol, and Rene Magritte are very interesting when we try to understand the concept of postmodernism. And this is something that Frederick Jameson uses in his book, The Cultural Logic of Late Capitalism. Thank you.